From America and across Europe, the big names have brought the big money to London, and this game is all about making your friends go broke. Each player is starting with a minimum of $100,000 of their own cash, and if they lose it, they can simply reach into their own pockets and buy back in. The starting lineup for this game is a who's who of poker. Lithuanian-born Tony G now lives in Australia. He is a player who likes to impose himself at the table, and after tasting a little bit of success last year, is hungry for more. Alan Cunningham has picked up 5 World Series of Poker bracelets and has nearly $10 million worth of cash in the bank. Another American, Andy Block, is a rock, paper, scissors champion and has nearly $3 million in poker tournament prize money. Chris Jesus Ferguson is a man used to success. Living in Las Vegas, he has $6 million in tournament prize money. Phil Ivey is widely regarded as the best cash game player in the world. This golf fanatic will be confident of adding to his tournament winnings. Heralding from Finland, Patrick Antonius now lives in Las Vegas. He is one to watch, and this tennis player will be looking for the aces. Brian Townsend is a famous online player, but he is used to the big time and is a regular high-stakes cash game player. Hello and welcome to the FullTiltPoker.com $1 million cash game in association with 50 London. We have got 11 of the world's most notorious high rollers who've all brought hundreds of thousands of dollars of their own money to the table in order to try and make as much profit as possible over the course of the series. Let's get you straight to your commentators as the action continues. Gary Jones is alongside David Tuckman.
Button is in front of Chris Ferguson. Small blind, Phil Ivey. Big blind, Patrick Antonius. Brian Townsend. He's going to be first to act. I'm David Tuckman, alongside poker professional Gary Jones. And Brian Townsend's got a hand here. Ace-10 offsuit he's going to play. Looks like he's bet at 2,100.
Well, here's Alan Cunningham with pocket fives.
Alan Cunningham going the speed limit. Well, at least in America, that's the speed limit.
Yeah, wouldn't mean too much to the European, especially the English audience, 55, ours being 70. 3 players going to see the flop. King, Queen, Patrick Antonius, Ace-10 for Brian Townsend, and pocket fives.
2 Jack-5.
And look at this, another set for Alan Cunningham, but unfortunately nobody's got anything.
The Jack, the one big card that the other 2 don't have. Brian Townsend might make a continuation bet, but I think that's going to be all that Alan's going to get.
Well, it's been one of those days for Alan where even when he hits his big hands, he's not getting paid off.
5,800.
Or he's getting outdrawn, of course. He's set earlier on, getting turned over.
Exactly.
By the flush of Patrick Antonius.
Brian makes it 5,000 to go.
Called.
Alan's going to call this. Doesn't want to blow away his opponent. It's a rainbow board, Jack-5 deuce. Patrick Antonius gets out of the way. And here we are to the turn.
Jack.
And the turn is another Jack here. And at this point, you hope to God your opponent has a Jack. But unfortunately for Alan Cunningham, he does not.
Well, what Brian Townsend's probably thinking is Alan Cunningham's making the call on the flop with a hand like 8s or 9s, thinking there's only one overcard, I might be good. So Brian's going to try and blast him through this one. Try and get rid of him. I can be pretty sure it won't. It's just a question of whether Alan decides to call.
600.
Or if he decides to raise it. If he gives his opponent a Jack here, a raise would be fantastic. Especially with the chips he has.
Well, at this point, if Alan Cunningham just merely calls, you have to imagine Brian Townsend is going to shut down.
It's a question of does he shut down if an ace comes? He probably does. He probably doesn't put any more money in this pot.
Now remember, Alan Cunningham only started his hand with $63,000. So there's no real urgency to get the money in there. He doesn't have that much to start with.
The only thing that may speed him up is the spades.
Moved all in.
Well, he's moved all in.
Alan's announced all in.
I think
And
this one's going to be over and done with pretty quickly. Yep.
Yeah, all the drama gone there. Alan got about as much as he could out of that one.
Yeah, sometimes it's good to play your sets quick, and sometimes it's good to keep it, keep your opponent up and betting, and that's what he did. Brian Townsend fired one more shot. He was never going to get any more money out of this one, I don't think, Alan, so he just ended it quickly, hoping that Brian's got a jack.
Absolutely.
To get started, one player is made the nominated dealer or button. Then the two players to the left post the small and big blinds. These are force bets to get the action started. The big blind is always double the small, but unlike a tournament, the blinds rarely change. However, they are sometimes increased to spice up the action. We start here with $300 and $600. There's also an ante of $100 per player, which must be paid if they want to play in a hand. Once the blinds and antes are posted, everyone is dealt 2 cards. We have a round of betting. Then 3 cards are placed face up on the table, called the flop. These are the community cards for all the players to use. Then we have another round of betting, after which the 4th card, the turn, is placed in the middle. This is followed by some more betting and the last community card, the river. Then we finish off with a final round of betting. The best 5-card hand takes the money.
Well, we have now got one of the biggest games ever in the history of televised poker. $500, $1,000 blinds, $200 antes. Flop is ace-7 deuce, rainbow here. Heads up action between Chris Ferguson and Brian Townsend. Both players have an ace here.
5,000.
But unfortunately for Brian Townsend, Chris Ferguson's got 2 pair.
5,000 called.
Also, Brian Townsend's just brought another 100,000 to the table before this hand started.
3.
The
Check.
3's going to give him a few more cards to improve with.
Yes, Brian can catch a 4 to win this pot, and that's pretty much it. Chris Ferguson with top 2 pair. And I'll be really surprised if Brian Townsend sticks around here.
14,000.
Pot is $31,900. And Brian Townsend
14,000.
is going to call. And we are going to see a river. And unless Brian Townsend gets real lucky and catches a 4, he's going to lose this pot.
8.
The river's an 8, changes
Check.
nothing.
Check from Brian Townsend. Over to Chris Ferguson.
Brian Townsend checks. Chris Ferguson figuring out how much can I value bet here. Pot is $45,900.
$35,000.
Can't possibly imagine Brian's going to call this one. No, he lets it go. He's going to be pretty glad he didn't catch the 5.
Obviously drawing dead to a 4 there. And Chris Ferguson makes a nice comeback. Once again, this is truly the $1 million cash game now. The antes are $200. The blinds are $500, $1,000, and we have well over $1 million on this table. Brian Townsend now in the game for $300,000. Phil Ivey in the game for $500,000. Patrick Antonius there. He's in the game for $200,000, and he's got $300,000 in front of him.
Alan Cunningham out of this one.
1,000 to play.
Andy Block.
3,000 to play.
Makes it 3,000 with the ace-5 of diamonds.
Pass. Pass.
Passed round to the blinds.
3,000
Brian
call.
Townsend decides to call. Just Tony G to go. He's got 1,000 in there in the big blind. It's just going to cost him 2 more. Oh, and an ace-jack of hearts. He's winning right now. How fast does he want to play this hand? He's already clashed a couple of times with Andy Block today.
Called. 3 players.
Andy Block pretty well giving the cold shoulder to Tony G. I think he's more interested in what's going in the bar rather than... wow, what a flop for the ace-jack of hearts.
Check.
Yeah, it really is a monster flop. He's a top pair, nut flush draw. He's in great shape here.
He's just got check, check, and wow, that really is an action turn card.
Last card.
Oh, it's an unbelievable card. Andy Block has made a wheel. He has made a straight.
Check.
And amazingly, no money has gone in the pot until the river. Tony G has the nuts here. He has the nut straight. The nut flush, I'm sorry. Short of a course of straight flush. Andy Block with the wheel.
He's just making sure. Yes, I do have the wheel. Now the question is, does he just call a bet of Tony G? Or is he going to re-raise? It's been played so strangely. It might be hard for him to give Tony the flush here. He's just called.
10. And pass.
Well, Tony G's got the minimum in this pot. I think if he'd have bet the turn, he could have got an awful lot more. Probably thinks that Andy's caught the king and he's played it well, but as it happens, if he'd have bet the turn, he could have got an awful lot more, I think.
Sitting down at a table and knowing you can win or lose $1 million happens every day, so I'm not worried about it. I mean, I don't think it's going to be those sort of big numbers, but if you win a few $100,000, it's a nice day. You know, Cap would make, even yesterday, make a better day today.
And after 132 hands, Tony G still in control, up over $270,000. Patrick Antonius still up over 60. Alan Cunningham, what a comeback. Only down $6,800 now. Phil Ivey still down $297,000.
Hello, welcome back to the FullTiltPoker.com $1 Million Cash Game in association with 50 London. It has been a blistering start to tonight's action. Let's hope it continues as we get back to our commentators Gary Jones and David Tuckman.
Pretty weak.
Phil Ivey's raising it up to 3,000, pushing a little bit with his 10-9. One player to get through, just Alan Cunningham in the big blind.
Obviously the customary raise now, and here's the other card, the Queen of Hearts.
11,000.
We always knew it was going to be bigger than the 10-9 in Phil Ivey's hand. It's been a re-raise of 8,000. 11 to play.
Phil Ivey still wondering what hit him.
He lets it go. And this one goes across to Alan Cunningham as well.
Come out firing.
And Alan Cunningham making a nice comeback. He is up almost to $100,000. He's only down $6,800 now.
Should have bet 5 on the flop.
And now it's $2,900 to play around. If you're Chris Ferguson, you really got to play some poker.
Well, he showed that he's not afraid to mix it up. We saw an early position raise with suited connectors, a couple of steals with things like 6-8 of spades. Every time he gets a half hand, he seems to get outplayed, though.
3,500.
3,500 from Brian Townsend. That's the kind of chips that you want to sit in this game with. Over $400,000 sitting in front of Tony G.
3,500.
He's also got the button. He's got the best hand.
Okay, 2 of you.
And he's heads up with Brian Townsend.
Pot is about $10,000 to the flop.
2, 10, 5.
10-5 deuce. Both players have top pair. We could see some fireworks here.
Well, if money starts going in, you can be pretty sure that Brian's going to know his kicker's not good.
You've got a diamond draw out there.
Brian Townsend just working out how much to bet.
Looks like he's going to bet 9,000.
7,200.
$7,200 was the bet. 7,200 was the call.
Quick call there. Pot is now 24,300 to the turn.
9.
The turn is a 9. Changes nothing.
Checked.
Big card would have been good for Brian there. Would have given him a lot of outs
Last card.
for a chop pot. Goes
4.
check, check. That check on the turn is going to get Tony a definite call on the river. In fact, it's going to get him a bet. Brian probably thinks he's value betting this hand.
You'd imagine so.
Can give Tony 7s, 8s, something like that.
Okay.
20,000.
20,000 a bet, 20,000 a call from Tony G.
10 with the jack.
Both of them with 10s. Tony G's going to win with his kicker.
20,000, you get 5 change.
I've got to see the cards.
10-8.
The check on the
right.
turn really won more
10,000.
money for Tony G there.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Brian was checking to call any kind of turn bet there.
No, it's right. I saw them.
Might have made a difference with the... Don't know what would have happened on the river if that had gone down that street. But chips beget chips, and Tony G wins yet another pot.
Don't value
And
bet
that puts
the
him above
bunnies.
$300,000 in the black. And a big grin from him.
Even I heard about that. Value betting. I was trying to work it out. What is that? Value betting. I mean, you either win or you lose. Why would you want to value bet when you have a good hand? You're just happy to take whatever's available.
And he's giving lessons as well.
That's value betting. Just happy to win a pot. That would have been a good value raise, though. Wow. Now, that would have been a play.
8-3 for Phil. Doesn't take too
Sometimes
much for him to pass those. I think he's probably getting a little bit frustrated right now.
Yeah, nothing's gone his way so far.
3,400.
King, queen offsuit here for Patrick Antonius.
3,400.
And he makes it 3,400.
What's that?
You won the minimum again. I won the minimum, right? Yeah. That's what I had to
Tony G can't do anything wrong today. He's going to call.
I haven't got
3,400.
the skill. Yeah. What can I do? I'm scared.
Andy Block seems to be sitting back a bit now. He was a little bit more active in the earlier stages.
And we're going to see this heads up.
Right, Andy? You know that.
Patrick Antonius against Tony G. The two
Two
big
grand.
winners so far.
King, ace, jack.
I see.
Not much there for Tony G at all.
I'd say.
Not much
Check.
there at all for Tony G.
10,000.
Check from Patrick, a bet from Tony.
I overbet that. I'm sorry. But 8? Wait.
Bet of 8,000.
Now Antonius has checked it to Tony G. Tony G uses his position and puts a bet in there.
They had a pot where this kind of thing went on earlier on, where Tony G just checked. That's when Patrick just checked,
10's cool.
and Tony kept betting and bluffing.
You wonder if Patrick Antonius is going to give him enough rope to hang himself.
Well, it's getting a bit scary out there. He's got kings and queens, but any 10's good.
Checked.
Tony G obviously drawing dead.
Well, he can split with a 10. Not good when you're only out as a chop. You can also possibly win it with a large enough bet.
Tony G checking. As if the cards might magically change.
15.
Only about half the pot. I can't imagine him getting rid of Patrick here.
No, that would really surprise me. I'd imagine the Finnish superstar is not going anywhere. And sure enough, you're correct. He's going to call this. And the pot is quickly $60,000.
Last card. 5.
The river's an inconsequential 5 of hearts. And if you're Tony G, you just shut down at this point.
Yes, he has. He's decided enough is enough.
Kings and queens.
Well, he played it with heart, Tony. Unfortunately, it cost him around $25,000 in that pot.
Would have showed some heart
Here we are with the ranking of the hands. First, we have high card. In this case, a king high would win it. Then we have one pair. In this case, pair of aces. Then two pair. Jacks and nines will do it. Then three of a kind. Three of the same one. Three fours. Then we have a straight. 5 cards in order, not the same suit. Then a flush. 5 cards, the same suit. 5 hearts will do it. Then we have a full house. 3 sevens, 2 kings. This would be sevens full of kings. 4 of a kind. 4 kings. Then we have a straight flush. 5 cards in order, all the same suit. And here's the most beautiful hand in the world. Royal flush. 10, 2 ace, all the same suit. Button slides over in front of Andy Block. Small blind, Chris Ferguson, $500. Big blind, Phil Ivey, $1,000. First to act, Patrick Antonius.
1,000 to go.
He can go back to stacking his chips. Jack deuce, not enough for him to play. Suited connectors for Tony.
And that is enough for him
He's
to play.
just decided to flat call. Andy Block flat calls on the button with his weak ace.
4 players.
Chris in with his Jack 7 and a big blind of Phil Ivey also in with 7-8.
8 ace. Check. Check.
Ivy with
Check.
bottom pair. But Andy Block's got top pair. No kicker, but he is ahead.
3,000.
3,000's the bet.
Pass.
It's good night from Chris.
And pass.
Good night from Phil. And good night from Tony G.
And Andy Block wins a hand. He's been waiting for this one for a while.
Still stuck $40,000, Andy. We almost forget that he is losing an awful lot of money in this game as well.
Well, speaking of losing a lot of money, how about Brian Townsend? He was late to the game, but he is down over $100,000 already. There he is. SB Rugby. Look at that. $102,000 down. But as you said, he's a gambler, and those large swings are nothing new to him.
Certainly not. He's had an up and down year. Well, it's a race in first position from Brian Townsend. A flat call from Tony G.
2 of you.
These two are to the flop. Tony G trying to mix it up a bit with his aces. If his 7 comes down, he might regret it.
10 jack, queen.
Well, it's not much of an action flop, especially with your opponent having 7s.
No, it's an ugly flop for Brian. If the flop had come out something like deuce 5-9, maybe you get some action from the 7s.
If he comes out deuce 5-7, you might get some action off the aces. This looks like a one-off bet to me.
7's called.
Bet of 7. Maybe he's showing what he's wishing for on the turn with the size of his bet. 7,000.
5. Checked. 10,000.
Tony G is going to bet here, and I like the bet.
Pass.
I think that kind of board, you have to bet. Don't give your opponent a free draw. And he kind of flashes the aces there. As he flips
Yeah,
them in
I
the
think he
muck.
sort of shows Alan Cunningham on his left, if Alan had been bothered looking.
There are 25 World Series of Poker bracelets in competition at this cash game. Over $1.5 million up for grabs as well. The race continues after the break. Welcome back to the FullTiltPoker.com $1 million cash game in association with 50 London. We've got 11 of the highest rollers in the game, all primed and ready for action as we get you back to your commentators, Gary Jones and David Tuckman.
And there's Tony G. He's first to act. Not sure if he's going to like the 10-5 offsuit, though.
Bit of a letdown after finding aces the previous hand.
1,000 play.
Really quite impressed with Tony G's play today. You notice that he doesn't play too many hands out of position.
Stack, Tony.
Now Chris Ferguson is in position. He's in the cutoff seat with Queen Jack offsuit, and that's enough to play. He's going to make it 3,000 to go. Now Phil Ivey doesn't have much of a hand, but he might be playing the player here. And he's going to re-raise.
10,000.
Yeah, I think that's a good re-raise. He probably knows that Chris isn't too comfortable playing at this kind of height of a cash game.
Looking to play a big pot.
Chris is in a good position to make a steal raise. Phil recognises that, re-raises and picks up the pot.
I'm never afraid.
Now Chris Ferguson, a phenomenal tournament player, doesn't have that much experience in cash game. Surprised that he's playing at this level. 500, 1,000 blinds with a $200 ante. There aren't many people in the world that'll play this high. But there's one of them.
I try to get myself into a rhythm, and I just kind of play how I'm feeling at the time and figure out what's going on around me. I mean, it's not really a tactic I use. It's just pretty much what my opponent's doing that day, and then I just try to make it the proper adjustments.
Early raiser, early caller.
Alan Cunningham first to act. Well, 10 deuce spades. Doyle Brunson won a couple of World Series championships with that, but
3,000.
not for Alan Cunningham.
Well, 3s for Andy Block, 8s for Chris Ferguson. Few combinations of the flop to make a little bit of action here. There's one of the 8s going.
Pass.
And we have two of the tightest players at the table battling it out.
With one of the loosest and the biggest winners.
Tony G can't avoid the party. Loves it.
3 players.
And he's in there with a queen 4 of clubs.
9, king, 5.
That's a pretty ugly flop for everybody.
Check, check.
Not a diamond in anyone's hand. Everyone playing all black.
Check.
Everyone checks.
Right, and that's no reference to Zealand, right?
6.
Still no
6,000.
help to anyone. But a bet of 6,000 from Tony G. Betting on air. The pocket 3s of Andy Block can't like it much. What's Chris Ferguson going to do here? 2 overcards on the board, 3 diamonds, but he does have a good shot. He can't like catching a set if it's a diamond. This one probably will go to the muck.
Well, at this point, you're not calling hoping for your straight, hoping for the gut shot. You've got to be calling thinking you're good.
Exactly. And he is up against Tony G, but still. No, that one goes to the muck. Another good bet from Tony G, recognising the other 2 very tight. Obviously didn't like the flop much. And he picks that one up and adds to his already impressive stack.
$1 million cash game after 138 hands. It's Tony's world. We just live in it. He's up almost $300,000. Patrick Antonius is adding to his lead here. He's up $89,000. Chris Ferguson, nice little bounce back, up $14,000. And look at this, Brian Townsend down $115,000, and Phil Ivey still down $294,000.
3,000.
Well, the button's in front of Brian Townsend, but it's already been raised up by Chris Ferguson. Hey presto, he's got 2 5s. He's got a caller from Phil Ivey. Finally found something he can mix it up with, 8-9. He's got position. He's got connectors.
And Tony G's not going to go anywhere. He's got a couple of axes there.
3 players.
Well, a 5-6-7 flop would really give Phil Ivey a chance to get out of it.
That would definitely be some action.
9, 8.
Not quite 5, 6, 7, but how about 2 pair up with Phil Ivey?
Checked.
Sadly, it's 3 overcards to both Tony G and Chris Ferguson's
Check.
hand. I'd expect a bet from Chris and probably a take it.
How about a bet from Phil?
8,000.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, not much there for everybody else. Now, unfortunately, some players might slow play 2 pair, but on a board like that, 2 diamonds,
A 10 or jack's going to bring a 4-card straight.
yeah, you just can't afford to give the free card. Nice bet by Mr. Ivey. Tony G in seat number 2.
Play.
And look at that. You remember early on when he lost a couple of hands? He was down to 54,000. He rebought for 50,000 and then doubled up. And look at that. Now he has $445,000 in front of him.
What an incredible turnaround for him. We've had a race in first position from Phil Ivey. It's round to the man in shot, Tony G. He's gone, so's Alan Cunningham. And an ace-10 for Andy Block. He's got, wow! It's the ladies for Chris Ferguson. Over $8,000 in the pot already.
And he is going to re-raise this here. He's going to make it 13,000 to play.
10 more.
Just not Phil's day.
And I think this is a pretty easy laydown here for Andy Block. Out of position against one of the tightest players in the game.
Still looks confused.
I mean, I guess he's thinking, is Chris Ferguson making a move? Could he be making a move? I suppose. But he's not.
The amount of times that Chris Ferguson's going to make a move in this position, if he's doing it this one time, good luck to him is what I say when I've got ace-10. He's let it go. Chris takes it down.
Well played by Mr. Ferguson.
Well, nice to wake up in the big blind with pocket queens. Not a lot to do when you've got that kind of hand.
And we are truly playing one of the biggest cash games in the history of televised poker. The blinds are 500, 1,000. The antes are 200. It costs $2,900 to play a round of poker here. Some of the greatest poker players in the world really putting it on the line. Their reputation and their money.
1,000 to play. Pass.
Although Patrick Antonius is going to pick a better spot to put his reputation and his money on the line.
Ace-queen for Brian Townsend. That must look like an absolute monster to him. Hasn't really seen much in the way of cards so far today. And he's raised it up. Alan Cunningham with ace-8 of diamonds. He hasn't seen that much either, to be honest.
3,500.
Ace-8 of diamonds, not normally a hand you'd be calling a raise with, but Brian Townsend's very aggressive, and Cunningham knows that. Obviously, Cunningham has position throughout this hand.
2 players.
He also won a nice pot against Brian Townsend, and sometimes you do make some strange calls against people you know you can beat because it'll always be going through their mind.
Queen 7, king.
Well, that's a middle pair for Brian. Not much for Alan.
Yeah, Alan's going to have to pull a rabbit out of his hat to win this one.
Check from Brian.
Checked.
Check from Alan.
Next card. 7. Checked. Checked. Last card.
Alan cannot win this hand now.
Ace.
But that might get Townsend paid off. Cunningham's kicker does not play. He has aces and sevens with a king kicker.
And that may be the thing that actually gets him some action in this pot, of course.
Exactly.
You can easily give Brian ace-jack, ace-10, any hand like that.
It's your best 5 cards in Hold'em. Townsend with aces and queens with a king kicker.
Bet.
And Townsend puts in about a $9,000 bet there.
7,000's called.
7,000 was the bet. 7,000 was the call.
Ace queens, 2 pairs. Aces and queens.
Really, the only card that was going to cost him money, the ace on the river.
I like the tisk. I didn't like the ace queen.
You constantly have to adapt your style when playing top players. If you do the same thing every time, good players like Patrick Antonius and Phil Ivey and everyone else at the table for that matter are going to catch on very quickly, and they're going to take advantage of that. So you really need to be doing things differently each time with the same hand.
Welcome back. At the moment, it is Tony G who's the force to be reckoned with. Let's see if he can continue to rack up the cash as we hand back to our commentators, Gary Jones and David Tuckman.
Patrick Antonius having a good time. Always helps when you're up thousands of dollars.
Just in case you're missing something.
That
He's in
usually,
front of Phil Ivey here.
that usually puts a smile on my face when I'm up thousands of dollars.
Actions on Tony G. And as usual, Tony G rarely playing out of position. Throws it away in first position.
Chris Ferguson in the cutoff. For those that don't know, the cutoff is the one to the right of the button. On the button is Phil Ivey pumping it up to 3,000. Just putting the pressure on the blinds. 8-6 of hearts enough for him.
That's the gap suited connector.
Blind defence from Patrick Antonius. As it happens, he's got the best hand right now.
8, 4, 10.
Well, not anymore. Actually, yes. Apologize there. Patrick Antonius actually his top pair. While Phil Ivey's got second pair.
It's gone check, check. Both players being a little bit sneaky.
King.
Turns the king of hearts, and now Phil Ivey's got more outs. He can catch an 8, a 6, or a heart to win this one.
A bet coming from Phil.
5,000. Cool.
Call from Patrick.
Last card.
To the river.
10.
And the river's the 10 of hearts.
That is the perfect card in the deck
It really
for
is.
Phil Ivey.
Checked.
Well, you're talking about backdoor hearts here. Patrick Antonius might not see it, and he has trip 10s. Pot is 18,400.
Cool.
Called for 16.
And Phil Ivey bet 16,000 on the river, and Patrick Antonius calls.
Finally something goes Phil's way.
It's a flush.
A flush versus 3 10s. And at last, Phil Ivey actually winning a nice size pot, around 50,000 in the middle. Yeah, it was around $300,000 behind. Now only $265,000. I can't believe I'm saying now only $265,000, but it's less than it was.
Phil Ivey, the consummate professional. He knows he can't win it all back in one hand.
Already got the 200s in. 1,000 to go. 1,000 to play.
Chris Ferguson, 7-4. Oh, come on, Chris. You can do it. See, Phil Ivey's got 7-4. He's going to play it.
Looks like a flat call from Phil. Looks like it's not going to be a flat call from Patrick Antonius.
Now he's got the 5s.
4,500.
Brian Townsend going to quickly call.
Pass.
Tony G's out. He was trying to sneak in, Phil, and get a cheap one. It didn't work.
No, and we're going to see this heads up between Patrick Antonius and Brian Townsend.
2 players.
Pot is about $10,000.
933.
Not too bad a flop for pocket 5s.
If you're not going to flop a set, that's a pretty good flop. I know there are times to get tricky, but with pocket fives here, you can't let an overcard come.
No. Better 9 or 10,000, what I'd expect here.
7,200.
And Patrick Antonius puts a bet out there, and that's enough to take it down. And the button slides on over to Brian Townsend.
I find cash game way more exciting. First of all, you can make more money than in playing tournaments, playing big cash games, and it's about real money. You can lose a lot. So it's a different game, and usually it's very deep stack poker, which is more skill. And I think the best players are the best high stakes cash game players.
Once again, the blinds are now 500, 1,000. Antes are $200.
1,000 to play.
Tony G in the small blind. Andy Block first to act. He's not going to play the Jack Deuce. And Chris Ferguson's got a couple of nines. He likes it. He's going to make it 3,000.
Oof. The aces for Phil.
3,000.
And finally, Phil Ivey's luck is starting to turn.
Well, he's decided to be clever. He's called the 3. I wouldn't say his luck's started to turn yet, and a 9's probably going to come.
3, 6,
Well,
5.
no 9, but it's a good flop for Phil Ivey. Ferguson's got the overpair. And obviously, Ivey has the biggest overpair.
Oh, Chris might regret giving that check. He's not going to know where he is.
5,000.
Now, Chris Ferguson has been doing this all day, where he checks it to Ivey, Ivey bets and takes it away. You wonder if Ferguson is going to check raise here. And if he does, he can be in a lot of trouble. Pot is 13,900. 5,000 to call.
Just a check call from Chris.
Five.
Turn is the 5 of diamonds. That could be a scary card for both players. Ivey's actually got the ace of diamonds in his hand, though. And Ferguson is drawing to
check.
2 outs here. 9 of diamonds, or the 9 of clubs will do it, and that's it.
9 of diamonds would be desperately unlucky for Phil Ivey. It would give a full house for Chris and the nut flush.
15,000.
It's a nice strong bet here by Phil Ivey. $15,000. It's going to put the heat on Chris Ferguson. Chris Ferguson started this pot with 119,000. And he is going to call this bet.
15. 10 change.
And this pot is quickly turning into a monster. To the river. Queen of spades changes nothing.
Checked.
Pot is 48,900. Ferguson checks.
50,000.
And Phil Ivey bets $50,000.
That's a very big bet from Phil. Chris going to have to give this one some thought. Actually remove the glasses, not something you see very often. Shows he's a bit rattled. This is a very, very big pot.
I love the bet by Phil Ivey. It's kind of a big bet. Almost makes it look like he doesn't want to call. Finally, Phil Ivey's luck starting to turn. The cream always rises to the top, huh? And Chris Ferguson is going to make the call. He makes the call.
And Phil Ivey makes one step closer to getting out of this hole. How to slow play aces.
The interesting thing on Phil Ivey is he slow played it pre-flop by just calling the raise, but then betted on all 3 straights and bet a lot on the turn and the river and got the call from Chris Ferguson. And look at this, after 146 hands, Phil Ivey is now only down, and I say only, $191,000. But look at Chris Ferguson now. Chris Ferguson, after starting the day on top of the board, up over 50, he's now down 50. Tony G still on top of the board, up over $290,000.
So the big names of poker begin to come to the fore. It's been another fascinating evening here at the FullTiltPoker.com $1 million cash game. We'll hope for just the same next time. But from all of us for now, it's goodbye.